Okay, so for the next hour we'll talk about screenwriting. Now in particular I want to talk about feature film script writing. Now it seems from experience that many script writers, whatever their background, whether they've written corporate films, documentary films, short films, they all want to write feature films. Certainly I did. I started off writing gags and sketches and comic strips and a lot of radio, but I always wanted to write feature films. Of course, a lot of the skills from feature films, once mastered, are transferable to short films and so on. But I think when I decided I wanted to write feature films, I read textbooks, I read scripts, I watched films, obviously. But I was very lucky because I was working on a comedy show, I was team writer on a comedy show, and one of the guys on the show was the then chairman of London Film Screenwriters. And rather gradually and informally, he sort of taught me what matters when you write a screenplay. He cut through, a huge textbook and would say things like, yeah, you could do that, but do this. Don't do that, do that. And I know they tell you to do that, but do that. And it was the essentials. He taught me the essentials. And this is what it's all about, I think, screenwriting. It's getting that first draft done. And to do that, you have to concentrate on the essentials, I think. The simple things. You keep it simple. I know writers who have read textbooks, they've learned all about screenwriting, and they're frightened to death to write the first word because everyone slightly disagrees on how to do it, on what's the best route to writing a good screenplay. It's not an exact science. There are hugely different theories. Everyone says something slightly different. There are no rules as such. And really, you can ignore everything you're told. You can ignore everything I say today and still come up with a fantastic screenplay. So it's a tough order, really, telling you how to write a good screenplay because it's kind of up to you, really. But I think you do need to bear certain things in mind. And I think to do your own thing and to go away and write whatever you want, you should remember the basics. And so that's what I'm going to do. Compartment by compartment, I'm going to run through the essentials I think you should bear in mind before you write your first draft, which is, for me, the key step in any screenplay. So I think all the gurus agree that the first thing you must have is a good story and a good idea. Now, your job as a screenwriter is to force an emotional response from your audience. And you'll read in textbooks that the absolute template for a good screenplay is that you have a hero, your main character, who is faced with a problem, and that is established right at the start of the script, and he has a need, an overwhelming need. He is motivated to solve this problem and to reach his goal, and in doing so he must overcome a series of increasing obstacles throughout the script. And to overcome these obstacles, he must develop as a character through this script. He must have flaws at the beginning which are clear and obvious, and throughout the script he must meet these obstacles and overcome them through dealing with these flaws that are holding him back. Now this could be anything. This could be shyness, fear of water, fear of heights. But by the end of the script, to succeed and defeat whatever he's up against, he must overcome it. For example, you could write a film where our hero has a fear of heights. And the last scene could be our hero having to climb a tall building to defeat the baddie who is holding his family captive. And he has become a better person. He has changed. He has developed. This is the arc, the transformational arc that the textbooks talk about. And I think it's worthy of paying close attention to that. Your idea, your story that you have must be absolutely burning. It's the burning passion factor. You must absolutely want to write this script, almost to the exclusion of all else. You have to write it. You're compelled to write it. You'll stop going on dates or stop socializing because you have to sit down and write this script. You've got to be so keen and motivated to write it. I was going to make a very key point then, which would have illuminated this whole talk, and I've forgotten what it is. So, whatever it is, do it in your script. That's so annoying now. What was the point I was going to make then? It's gone forever. It's gone forever. And so the success of your script. Well, anyway, your script must from the start, from page one when you write it, it must hook, engage, grip, thrill, move your audience. If you're passionate about it, it'll come out in your script. If you are ambivalent about writing it, the script won't have any life. So you have got to write the very best you can. You've got to your passion for it has got to come out in the script. Now, to do this, you must have good and compelling characters. In your script, you will have main characters, secondary characters, and minor characters. You will probably have your main hero character, your major character. You will have probably an opposition character who opposes directly what your hero wants to achieve. You should also have a mirror character. This is someone who is often a confidant of your hero, someone that your hero will talk to and will kind of add texture and depth to what your hero is trying to achieve, what his goal is. And you should also have a romance character. Invariably, whatever the film, there is a romantic goal as well for our hero, who invariably does succeed on that. Now, again, to concentrate on this because it's so important, your character from the start of the film must not be perfect. He must have a flaw which he must overcome to win at the end of the film. As I say, it can be something minor, it can be shyness, but it's something holding him back, something that he has to address to succeed by the end of the script. Your characters we must be interested in your lead character, particularly. It's his story, he's going to lead us through the story. We don't have to love him to bits. You don't have to show him on page 1 stroking cats, holding babies, but we must understand him. We must hopefully be familiar with his dilemma. We must appreciate what he's going through, must have empathy, sympathise. Some of these things we must feel towards your main character. And to create a main character that is consistent and believable, you will have to create a backstory, not just for him, but for your other main characters too. We have got to know everything about your main character. We've got to know where he was born, his upbringing, his favourite food, what he likes on TV. We've got to know everything. You won't use it in the film, most of it, but you've got to know why he acts a certain way, because we learn from your characters, particularly your main character, from the way he reacts to things, his actions, and the decisions he makes. And so they're consistent. You've got to know everything about him, because a lot of scripts, the problems are the characters all sound and feel the same. They all do the same thing. They all act the same way. They act conveniently for the plot, and that's no good. If you have in your script your main character, for example, who is a neurotic middle-aged man, and he has a stroppy teenager, and the other main character is an OCD-raddled pensioner, they're probably going to sound differently and act differently, make different decisions. And unfortunately, in many scripts they don't. They all sound the same. Your hero, as I said before, must face obstacles and conflict in his journey towards his goal. Now, what sort of obstacles and what sort of conflicts? Well, it's argued that the most successful scripts and films, it's generally person against person, in direct opposition. Your hero wants something and there's someone directly competing against him in direct opposition. And obviously this is obvious in many, if you think of lots of thrillers, if you think Bond films, for example, it's so clearly and obvious what's going on here. There's Bond and there's Goldfinger or whoever, stealing gold or blowing up the world, and it's Bond's job to stop him. It's such a clear premise. Less obvious in some other types of films. If you think of romantic comedies, it's different, but it's still the same. There's still a goal. The hero wants to win the girl, and perhaps his hero is dishonest, he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's this, he's that. Well, clearly, you'd think and hope he'd have to address these issues to win the girl by the end. So these are the obstacles. However, you can have a character the problem is internal conflict. He has defects. He is, as I've just said, perhaps he's dishonest, he's a liar, he's a cheat, and he has to overcome these internal problems to achieve his goal. Also, many films I could cite here have rather different types of conflict and obstacles to overcome. For example, you could say the environment could be the problem, the obstacle. If he's on a desert island, that's an environmental problem. Back to the Future, it was time. Groundhog Day, which I was talking about earlier, is very much a kind of weird supernatural thing. It could be cultural, it could be a distance in the relationship. But you've got to build in these problems in your script. Otherwise, the script will be damp and limp. You've got to have our hero faced with problems. They say, theoretically, in a script, you should have 3 major obstacles that our hero faces, and it should go like that. 3 major obstacles, all greater than the one before it. And we're going to come on to structure now, but they occur, well, no, I'll tell you now, because I'm going to do structure for you. As with everything in writing feature films, there are dozens of theories. Nobody agrees on how you should structure a film. I'm talking about a feature film here. For easy maths, we'll say it's 120 minutes. Invariably these days they're not. They're much shorter, especially comedies. You know, it's 90-something is fine. But for maths, we'll say 120 minutes. Now, the theory is that you should have a 3-act structure. It's the old-fashioned, so many of our great films have been based on the 3-act structure, the classic Hollywood 3-act structure. 90% of films are based on this. Some people say it's out of date, it's had its day, and as I was saying earlier to some people, gurus will come up with all sorts of alternatives. They'll say it's out of date and you should do this and do that and have this and do this, and it's, well, that's fine, you can do what you like with structure. The trouble is, if you ignore structure, often you get a rambly, incoherent script which dips badly and inherently is wrong and feels bad. But if you overstructure, and I've read many, many scripts where all the writer has done is structure the script. He's forgotten everything else, and all he's done minute by minute by minute is follow a textbook. And so we know exactly what's going to happen because we know we're on minute 25 now. We know this is going to happen. And it becomes utterly predictable and stale and unemotional and cold. And the thing, so the happy medium is the best one. It's the one I do and my peers. We're aware of structure. It's there. It's the building blocks. It's the foundation. If you think of a bridge, you have that, and your story is linked all together with these posts. And when I write a script, all these things I'm talking about today, it's in my head. It's all at the back of my head, but it doesn't dominate. Certainly with the first draft. So all these things I'm saying today should be lodged in your head, but it shouldn't dominate. And structure should not dominate. It should be there as a guide, but no more. And I'm fond, certainly with the first script, if you write a first script, I'm fond of sticking to the 3-act structure because I could tell you so many great Hollywood films that have followed it. Remind me to talk about Witness later on because it's my favourite film and proof of how 3-act structure works. So I'll come back to that later. So structure, I'm now going to tell you all you need to know, I think, for your first draft. If it's your first screenplay, if it's not, when I write a script, this is all I remember about structure. You could read a book that long about structure, but I think this, again, it's keeping it simple, it's keeping the essentials. And with structure, this is, I think, what you need. 3 acts, 30 minutes the first act, 30 to 90 second act, 90 to 120 is the third act. The first act, well, we'll start straight away. Your first page, again, to bear in mind, but no more. Your first page obviously should be intriguing and should hook the audience and engage. But often on page 1, we meet the first character. We meet them often in an unusual and interesting situation, often a life crisis. Straight away, we're thrown into a dilemma. Wouldn't it be great if your opening scene was someone with a gun against their head or something like that? It's a life crisis, it's a dilemma in their life that they have to deal with. We meet your opening character, we know the genre, we know where, we know what time in history. Again, this is not a rule, this is just a general thing to bear in mind, I think. By page 3 to 5, but I always say page 3, something should happen. There should be a key line, a key moment, I think a key line of dialogue, where it's a line which will guide the rest of your script. It's a pivotal line which will give us the thrust for the whole script. It's what the script is about and gives momentum. Your script might be about that and that, but what's it really about? It could be something simple, family values, honesty, good outdoing bad, but most good films, there's depth and there's texture to it. It's not just about Bond, okay, bad example, because Bond films tend to be a bit simpler, but okay, it's about that and that, but actually, what's it really about? And there's a message there that you must try and convey. What's your script really about? Why are you writing this? Is it about honesty? Is it about overcoming something? And that message has got to be early on. We have got to know as an audience what your film is really about. And I think that key line of dialogue, one line, page 3, will say what it's about. And it could be, I'm no good at relationships, I need to do something about it. I am this, I am that. But it's someone, that's the goal, I need to address it. And interestingly, good films often have this line repeated at the end, the very end of the script, but the line is slightly changed, and it shows how far a character has come. And it's very neat. They're bookends, and I like doing that when a script starts with something and ends with something. On that theme, films have themes, as I've been describing, but they also have repeated images. And Witness is a perfect example of this, where an image at the front of the script, page 3, page 5, early on, is repeated near the end as a bookmark, and it shows how far we've come. And Witness, off the top of my head, I think we have an image, it's very visual at the beginning of Witness if you've seen it. It's a Peter Weir film with Harrison Ford, mid-80s. Image of a hill, a brow of a hill, and it's just a lovely visual image. By the end of the film, it's changed to show the Amish people coming over the hill with their makeshift weapons to defeat the baddies. So peaceful to that, and it's that's a neat touch. But anyway, the first act of your script, up to page 25-30, it's about your main character. We see a lot of your main character, but we also introduce all your main characters and the subplots. I'll come to subplots in a minute, but subplots must be introduced here. They provide, well no, I'll come to subplots later, but the first act is our hero embarking on his goal, and actually, he does pretty well. Things are going well, it's all falling into place. Actually, sometimes by page 25, by minute 25 of a film, we actually think our hero is about to resolve the problem. We think already, we're watching this film, we think, he's almost there, he's figured it out. So page 25, the film's about to end. What's happening here? But that's when we have our first major obstacle, our first theoretical big turning point. First turning point, they call it an inciting incident at this point. It's a pivotal moment. Something changes for the worse for our hero, a dramatic setback, which means he has to reevaluate what he's doing, he has to realign his commitment, and generally his goal has altered. He has a new and different goal that he must pursue, which is very different from the one he set out. And at this point, he decides, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to overcome this. No matter how difficult and the fact that my goal has changed, I'm going to do it. And this provides us with a thrust into Act 2. Act 2 is 30 to 90, as I say. We'll go 30 to 60 first of all, which is our hero embarking on this renewed goal with renewed commitment. And again, he does okay. He seems to be going through everything fine. At page 45, or minute 45, again, this is all theoretical, of course. This is all template, and if you really want to, it's just something to bear in mind in the back of your head. There's a focus point at 45, which focuses the script a little bit. It reminds us of the problem. It gives a further test for our hero in his goal. By 60, of course, it's halfway point in the script. This is the point of no return. This is the halfway point. Our hero is faced with another catastrophic setback. This is our second of the major big obstacles. And he must decide now, faced with yet more problems, whether to carry on or give up. He could, he's come halfway, he may as well just give up. Or does he carry on? Of course he carries on. And he carries on with renewed confidence, with greater commitment. He's not passive anymore. He is utterly committed to the cause. He has renewed energy now, and this drives us into the second half of the second act. 75, we have another focus point, which again tests our hero, sometimes gives a clue to how he can resolve this big dilemma and this big goal that he's facing here. When we come to the end of the second act, we're talking now page or minute 85. This is the worst point in the film for our hero. This is the lowest point. And once you know what this, it's amazing how many films follow this. It's quite incredible, really, once you know the template, how films invariably do follow this. This is the lowest point. This is when our hero has a gun to his head. This is when he's tied to an engine of a rocket that's about to take off. This is James Bond when he's thrown into the sharks, and you think, well, this is it. How can he escape? This is the end of the film, and yet it's 30 minutes to go. Well, this is when our hero, faced with these odds, up against it, world about to end, completely fails at his goal, doesn't. This is when he has renewed vigor, there's a clue, something helps him, somehow it turns and spins, and he is given renewed belief and hope to fight his obstacle, his villain, to the very end of the script. What is very interesting about the end of Act 2 is that at the end of Act 1, we thought the hero had succeeded and the script was about to end. But here at the end of Act 2, we think he has utterly failed, but he hasn't. So it's a neat little tie-up.
So we're into the last act now. Often there's a quiet bit at the start of the final act where our hero dwells on how he's going to achieve his aims and how is he going to defeat the villain. You know, he talks to his confidant, the mirror character, or his romantic figure, and then he sets about the final charge to the climax. Now, the final act of a film, invariably, this is the exciting bit. Again, it depends on the genre, but in action films, of course, this is when you'll have the car chase and the big bangs and the fight to the death against the villain. It often is life and death, or of course in romance it's not, it's whether he gets the girl or not, or it can be anything, but there has to be an identifiable goal, there has to be a need, and also importantly, which I forgot to mention, we have got to know that if our hero fails in his goal, there will be dire consequences for him. So in the case of Bond films, well, obviously the world's going to end, that's pretty serious. In the case of romance, well, he's not going to get the girl. Okay, that doesn't quite compete with the world ending, but it's still, we've got to care. We've got to care for the character. We've got to want our hero character to win. Because if we don't really care about the film. So whoever the character is, some new characters aren't particularly likeable. Again, Groundhog Day, as we were talking about it earlier, Bill Murray's character in that, he's not very likeable, is he? But I was keen to know how it worked out. I was keen for him to succeed. I was keen to know how it was resolved in the end. So there we are. This is the final act. This is our rush to the final climax. And in a 2-hour film, you'll get this about 115, 118. This is where we have our final big bang, our final climax. This is why you've been watching the film. This is how it's going to be resolved now. Usually for the good, of course, unless it's one of Geordie's scripts and it ends with doom and gloom and misery. But generally, you have a good ending. It doesn't have to be a rose-tinted Hollywood happy ending, but it has to be satisfying. It has to be the right ending. And often scripts that do have a dismal ending, they show them to the public and they have them rewritten because people don't like it. It's got to be some hope at the end of your script. The classic template is that your hero succeeds, he defeats the baddie, and the hero then reflects for a few minutes before the end of the script. We have a pause before the end of the film where your hero reflects upon his success, how he's changed as a character, he's climbed up the building, overcome his fear of heights, and he has achieved his goal. But the end of your script must have a feeling of afterlife, that there's something beyond this. To end a script on a big bang, no, you've got to see the character after that and know that world goes on, that his life goes on after that. Think of Jaws, by the way, it just occurred to me, one of my favourite films. I think Police Chief Brody in it, he has a fear of water, doesn't he? And he has to overcome that fear of water to defeat the shark. So again, that perfectly ties in with what I've been saying. He overcomes a rather, not a huge flaw, but it is a flaw, and it becomes a huge one because he needs to overcome it to defeat the shark. So that's what I'm trying to say. So that's the end of your script. You have created, that's how to use structure. Anyway, now, here's the big one I was talking to Phil earlier about, which is, from the scripts I've read, is fundamentally the biggest flaw generally. Well, we'll come back to that in a minute, not necessarily. If you create bad characters and poor structure, they're also bad, but dialogue. And dialogue is my favourite part of a script. I love writing dialogue and getting dialogue right. However, it is, I think, the biggest problem for many writers. They write too much, and what they write is not necessary. It's boring and doesn't say anything. Just remember something else before maybe this was the line I thought about earlier. With your idea, no, I've forgotten it again. I'll carry on with dialogue. What people get wrong with dialogue is, no, I have remembered it. The idea, yes, your film, and this is something I've always done with my films, the high concept. So often, the best films are the ones you can sum up in 2 lines, in the palm of your hand. Movie people love it, the industry loves it, when you can describe a film in 2 lines. And if you can't with your film, sometimes I ask people what the film's about, and they talk for 10 minutes, say, well, what happens is that he goes there, and then that happens, and I think, What you need to do is be able to say, man-eating shark terrorizes a seaside town, police chief must overcome his fear of water to defeat the shark. That's how you should be able to sum up your film. It's very handy if you can do that. You'll need it at some point. Your letter that you're writing to an agent or whoever, you need to sum up the film very quickly. So there we are. Dialogue. The problem people do far too often with dialogue is they use it wrongly. They use it to convey information. They're very lazy and they use it to tell us everything. to tell us backstory, to tell us everything. For example, I've seen lines of dialogue where it's, "Hi, how are you today? I'm all right, but I'm still sad that the fact my wife left me 2 years ago, my house burnt down, then I lost my job, and then what happened is that I went to the..." Well, that's ridiculous. You don't talk like that, and that's a very lazy way of using dialogue, so don't do that. Also, showing character with the use of dialogue. So, for example, if I'm uneasy about something and someone's talking to me and they say, "How are you today?" I say, "Well, I'm not happy about that. Actually, I'm a bit unsettled. I'm a bit puzzled at what to do." And what you need to go is have someone reacting, going like that. It's a gesture. It's body language. It's how people react. That avoids that much dialogue straight away. And remember, of course, film is visual. Dialogue is a last resort, really, in most cases. Try everything to say what we've got to say. Show, don't tell. That's what they all say. I'm surprised I got that far without saying it. Show, don't tell. It is, you must think, the screen's that big. We can see what's happening. The audience are clever. They don't need to be spoon-fed. Don't keep repeating the same things. Don't tell us what we already know in dialogue. Show us everything. However, dialogue does have its use. Dialogue does have its uses. Yes, it can show character. Of course it can. Again, to use my earlier example, a pensioner, a stroppy teenager, someone having a midlife crisis, they all talk differently. And you can show character with the language they use. Of course you can. You can further story through dialogue. You are allowed to use it for that in moderation. And of course the pacing of dialogue is very useful in a script. You can't have a script full of prose. Dialogue is essential. And most vital of all, dialogue, good dialogue, fantastically aids a script. As I say, it's my favourite part of a script. And we all can think of films with fantastic dialogue in, whether it's dramatic or comic. You think of Four Weddings and a Funeral off the top of my head. Great dialogue. Woody Allen, Marx Brothers films. Dialogue is used wonderfully. It's funny. But if you are going to use dialogue, here are the basic rules that I always have in my head. Dialogue is not real-life conversation. Okay, in a script, I wouldn't ever write, "Hi, how are you today?" "Fine, how are you?" "I'm okay, but I'm a bit under the weather." "Oh, that's funny because I had a cold last week, but I took 2 paracetamol and I'm fine now." "Really, I don't use paracetamol, I use aspirin because I hear that..." You don't do that. You don't need any of that. And dialogue in a film is crisp, concise, it's measured, it's understated, it's underwritten, it's economical, it's the bare essentials, it's simple. It's simple words, simple phrases. Some people I know, they won't write any dialogue that has more than 3 sentences. That's as much as they'll give anyone in one blast. Just 3 sentences. Well, it depends on how long sentences are, but even so. It's just about 3 lines. We should say 3 or 4 lines of dialogue, I think, maximum, at any one go. Because people don't like huge chunks of dialogue. It doesn't work on film. If someone's just sitting there talking. Of course, in fact, I think of one in Jaws, but generally, long monologues don't work. However dramatic, people do get bored. Break them up into chunks. 3 or 4 lines sounds good to me. You've got to have people sounding different when you use dialogue. To use my 3 people example again, they all sound different. But a common failing is that dialogue doesn't sound different. Everybody sounds the same. You can't cover up the names and know who's talking. And as I say, a teenager is going to talk differently to a pensioner, is going to talk differently to an angst-ridden middle-aged woman. Of course they are. That doesn't mean relying on colloquialisms or slang. You don't need to do that. But they sound different. And often the problem with dialogue is that it doesn't. The key thing with dialogue is that you go in at the last moment and you come out at the first possible moment. Like going to a party, you arrive late and leave early. That's true for dialogue. It's true for your whole script. And don't use dialogue to repeat what we already know. And actually, talking of arriving late, leaving early, once you've mastered dialogue, once you've got it down to its bare essentials, every word matters with dialogue. I get OCD pouring over my dialogue, and every word, does it matter? Can I trim it? Can I get rid of it? If someone says, in a moment, I think, no, I don't need in a moment. That's how bad I am, because on screen, if there's too much dialogue, it slows the whole thing up, and it's horrible. Once you've mastered dialogue, though, once you've got this idea to be concise and brief and economical, that should apply to the whole of your script. And this particularly applies with your scene direction. This is the business. This is where you write what's happening in the scene. Now, too often in scripts, and I've seen many where it's a novel. There's a scene in a cafe, and all you have to write is two people sitting at a table in a cafe. What you don't need to do, which I sometimes see, is man picks up cup from saucer, puts it to his lips, drinks tea and puts it down again, lifts up the spoon, stirs the cup's tea and puts it down again, and scratches his chin, reaches for the cup again and drinks the tea again. Well, unless that somehow is pivotal to the plot or shows character, you don't need to do that. The director will know better than you anyway how to, don't tell him what to do. Everything you write has got to forward character and the plot. And for me, that doesn't. And too often people are too poetic and too wordy in their descriptions of what's happening in the scene, and it gets very boring. Again, 4 lines. 4 lines maximum when you describe what's happening in a scene is ample. But here is your chance, just like dialogue, to be very lively and engaging when you write scene description. It's a great opportunity to really lift the script, and you shouldn't write it blandly. The cafe example I get was a bland line, but always think of how to make something mundane sound good. Writing style, it's style quite often that lifts the script, as well as the content, of course. So there we are. That's dialogue, and that's that. Subplots, which I mentioned earlier. Your script will have subplots. You'll have your main plot with your main hero and his goal. You'll probably have another subplot which mirrors what's going on with your main story. For example, if you have a middle-aged mother who is trying to date again, she's divorced, she's trying to date again, and the story is about her quest for love. Maybe she has a teenage daughter who is 16 or 17 who is going through the same, and that would be the perfect subplot. It would feed in to what's happening in the main plot, and that is the purpose of subplots. They illuminate the main plot, they feed into it, they give it gravitas, and they help. And you should have 3 to 5 other subplots, they say as well. But again, must be related to generally what the film is about. And at the end of the script, they all, the 115, 118, and plus that, by then, everything's been resolved. All the subplots, everything is tied up at the end of the script. So that's subplots for you. I want to talk to you now about the first draft. Because with all this in mind, in your head, having learnt about, you've got a good idea, you know about structure, you know about dialogue, you know about creating compelling characters, you have got to write your first draft. And as always, there are countless theories on how to write your first draft. For me, there's just one theory, and it's the one I've always done and most of my peers done, and that is you just write it as quickly as you can. In one great big swoop, you've got everything in your head, you're bursting, you're ready to go, and this is when it comes from the heart. This is when your passion for your story explodes in one creative outpouring, and you don't stop, you just do it. You finish it, start, finish, a week, 10 days, whatever. That's what seems to be the case for many good writers. They just do it. And what you don't want to do, which lots of people do, finish page 1 and start rewriting. No, don't get to page 3 and think, oh, it's rubbish, and give up. Just write the thing, because there's no question that your first draft will be miles away from your final draft. And that's fine, because your first draft is the exploratory draft. This is when you explore, you should have a free rein, you have license to do whatever you want and write whatever you want. And I can tell you absolutely that when I do this, new things come into my head all the time that I wouldn't have thought of had I not given myself free rein to write whatever. Yes, I bear in mind everything I've told you, structure and so on, it's all there, but I don't worry too much about it. I don't worry about length, I just get it done and get it finished, because your goal is to get it finished, because a lot of people don't. They give up because they think, oh, it's rubbish, and they show it to their mum who says it's rubbish, and they give up. Get it finished. Some people I know, because I've seen it in textbooks, I know a couple of writers who do this, every scene that they're going to write, they plan it meticulously. They even write little cards and what's going to happen in the scene, and they have them all lined up, and it becomes dot to dot, and they just write and write and write. Well, for me, that rather stems the creative process, because you're effectively stuck to the scenes that you've planned, and your first draft should be where that doesn't matter. You can come back to that later. Throughout the rewriting process, you can attend to all the technical side of it, all the details, but not at this stage. This is the creative outpouring. This is where it goes beyond what you thought the script would be. It's even better than you thought. So that's the first draft for you. Just going to say something about format at this stage, because a lot of people get spooked by film formats. They think that a script reader is going to pick it up, and if it's not the right format, they're going to chuck it away. Well, they will, probably. It's very easy to get formats correct. A film format is not a difficult thing. So I'm not going to dwell on it now, because you can look at books, you can look online, you can read scripts, you can even get computer packages that will do the whole thing for you. It's quite simple, really, and actually, it's fine. It's quite easy, but you've got to get it right, because if you don't do it, people won't read it. But it doesn't matter if you're millimetre. The line of dialogue is a millimetre too much to the right or left. It doesn't matter about that. In fact, I cannot remember picking up 2 scripts in a row where they're exactly the same. As long as they roughly, the dialogue's where it should be in the character name and so on, that's fine. Millimetres here and there, people aren't too bothered about. So that's formatting for you. Your rewriting process. Now this is where the whole thing comes alive. This is where you craft your script. You've done the first draft, and it's probably not going to be very good, or it might be brilliant, one or the other. Most of mine are absolutely horrendous and horrific, and I'm embarrassed, but it doesn't bother me because I know the rewriting will fix that. How do you rewrite? Again, there are numerous theories. I read one the other day online, an American guru who said you only need to do one rewrite. What you do is you prepare everything in your head, you just sit down, and you just put it all into one rewrite. Well, I can't see how that's possible because scripts evolve. The rewriting process, you should nurture your script. It should evolve. You're refining it. And there are 2 theories on that theory. One is that each component of a screenplay that we've talked about today, your story, characters, dialogue, whatever, structure, each rewrite gets one specific rewrite looking at just that. So I'll rewrite it looking at structure, rewriting it, tidy up the dialogue, rewrite it doing this, that and the other. I can't do that. I don't see how. I can't. I've never been able to do it. If I'm attending to structure and I see a lousy piece of dialogue, I can't ignore it. So the way I do it, and lots of people do, is that, as I said, you refine each draft and look at each component in each rewrite. So when I rewrite I've done my first draft, I do my second draft, it'll be arm's length, I'll look at the whole thing and I'll give myself a checklist, 1,000 questions about the script. Is it compelling? Is it dramatic? Are there twists and turns? Is our hero convincing, consistent? Everything I've talked about, I'm devil's advocate and I question it. All those areas. Is the dialogue snappy? Is it boring? Is there a satisfying climax? The subplots neat? Everything I've talked about, I question it. I'm devil's advocate. And you can get checklists and books which will guide you through this process. Very useful. And then once I've done all this and I've looked at it from afar, stood back and tried to give some distance to it and looked at it overall, then I'll read it and then I'll go through and hack it, which is normally what it is. It's normally the editing process. I tend to overwrite. A script I'm writing at the moment is it's 123 pages, which is far too long. And I've just done my first rewrite and it's now 107. And that's fine, and obviously quite often the editing process is simply that. You're editing out the stuff, the dialogue and all the boring bits you don't need that don't further character or the story. So that's rewriting for you. The final rewrite, the very, very final rewrite, is when you pore over every word. Is when it's a terrible, hideous process when you look at every word and say, is that right? Can I do it somewhere else? Can I do it visually? It's terrible, and you look at the thesaurus and you beat yourself to death, and it's just a hideous experience. It's awful. But you have to do it, and when you've done that version and you read it again, there's nothing you want to change, then it's ready for your confidants, whoever you know that knows what they're talking about with film, to read it and give their opinions of it. And normally they all say something different, but nevertheless that's the way it is. Your goal in writing a screenplay, a feature film screenplay, is to get in the top 5% of screenplays that are received by film companies, because by their own admission, 95% of them are not suitable. Now, of that 95%, well, let's not say that. Let's just say that if you present it properly, if your format's correct, if your grammar and spelling is correct, then your chances are good. I've read some scripts that are straight away, the spelling is awful, they're in the wrong format, full of camera angles. I forgot to mention this, but the current vogue is that you don't write camera angles. You leave that to the director. I read a script the other day and the opening line was, camera pulls back to reveal so-and-so, close shot of so-and-so, his point of view shows, it's just all camera and it was just terrible. So you don't do that. But if you've done the right format, your presentation's neat, you've spelt it right, your grammar's correct, if you've got a good story, if you've created compelling characters, if your dialogue's tight, if it's well structured, if you had a satisfying conclusion, then you've written a good script. And that is your goal. And good scripts succeed. And that's all there is to it. That's all I've got to say.
Richard, that was a fantastic rattle through. And
High speed.
I'm sure there's going to be some interesting questions. Who's first? Deb.
For the last couple of years, I've been taking part in a short film writing competition, and it's the New York Midnight Film Challenge. You get 48 hours, you get given a genre and a prop and a location. And a couple of times they really picked me up on using very British things like tea time, which I didn't realise was just a British thing. When you're writing your script, do you worry about that kind of translation from British to American or other audiences?
No. Well, funnily enough, the first few scripts I wrote in American because I wrote straight for the American market. So then I had to be careful of sidewalks and so on. But you miss some along the way, of course you do. But I don't think that's a major problem. Certainly right now, because the film I've written right now is an English film, it's Somerset based. But no, I don't worry about. No, that's fine. Tea time is tea time, isn't it? No, never a problem with that. I think there are a multitude of other failings that go well before that one. So your script will fail long before it fails on tea time.
And the next one, David.
If you're cutting your dialogue down to a minimum, as you said, how do you get over to your director what your characters look like and their mannerisms and so forth?
Well, there are two things to say on that. First of all, whenever you introduce a character in your script, it's always wise and it's perfectly acceptable to write a line or two about them. Don't necessarily say they're 6'1", blonde hair, blue eyes, with a scar, because that's too specific and you'll never find an actor like that probably. What you do is give a hint at their character in the description. So for example, you would say he's 40, tall, slim, but strained and expression of pain or something along. That's what I tend to do anyway. Or I was actually very specific in one script that had a female character, and I said she was square-jawed and must look like David Coulthard. Well, that's ridiculous. I don't know why I did that, but I thought it was funny at the time, but it wasn't. So yeah, don't be specific. It's up to the casting people who they cast, and you can't, unless there's an overwhelming need if you need a dwarf, for example, then fine, you've got to specify it, but it's not up to you.
That as an aside from the dialogue.
What the character looks like? Yeah, when you first introduce a character in your script, you have the names in capitals. You'd say, Bill Smith, commos, mid-40s, tall, but angst-ridden and, not at ease with the world because of various calamities. You can't see that in the film. Of course, you can't show that in the film, and that's generally frowned upon, to write stuff that you can't see. But I think it's okay to write. You've got to have some idea who the character is. And I always do that. I've never been beaten up for it. So just give an idea of the person, but not specifically what they look like, particularly unless it's vital. If you have you've got a beautiful girl in it, you specify beautiful girl. Or if her age is important, very important, yes. But no more than that, really.
Yeah, and you were talking here about writing for a feature film, but it seems to me that pretty much everything you've said would apply if you were shooting a documentary or something like that. You need to have some sort of, you may not have control over the characters, you've got to build something out of what's there. But there needs to be some kind of storyline through it, some human interest thing, no matter what it is. I mean, the age you do it with animals, you know, they find some way of engaging people.
Well, definitely. That's the first line I think I said on the ideas thing. You've got to provoke a response from the audience. They've got to be emotionally involved in it. Because if they're not, if they don't care about the characters or don't care about the story, it falls flat. It's hopeless. You've lost them from the first minute. So you've got to do all you can as a writer, quite deliberately, to hook them straight away. And you're right. I think this is why I think writing for film is such a great discipline, because it tightens up every other form of writing you do. Makes you far more direct and purposeful in what you do. And when it comes to any form of other, whether it's documentaries or whatever, you write pertly and succinctly, and you'll cut through all that and just get straight to the point. And that's what film writing is. It's getting to the point.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's the writing bit. What happens when you finish and you want to make money out of it?
Yeah, that requires another hour, really, doesn't it? It's, well, there's several routes, aren't there? I mean, if you've written a good script, film script, you're confident of it, your best route is to go to an agent, a literary agent, who will know the markets far better than you. Film companies invariably don't even allow you to send unsolicited scripts to them. It needs to come through a bona fide agent. But that's not a problem, because agents make money from you. They want new writers, even if they say they don't. They do, and it just requires a careful letter. I could tell you, we haven't got time, I suppose, but how I did it and how people do it. You write a 2 or 3 paragraph letter. First paragraph is your film idea. Hello, enclose the first 10 pages. That's often all they want of my script, plus a synopsis and a biography of you if you've done interesting things. And my script is about a man-eating shark that attacks, terrorizes a seaside town. You should write about yourself. If you've got any credits, you should write about yourself in the second paragraph. Leave it like that. Do as they say. Send 10 pages. And if it's good, you'll hear back from them. If your script's good, you'll hear from a literary agent that you'll be successful. Often a numbers game. My agent was number 16 that I approached. It's not necessarily because the script's bad. They've got enough writers like you. They're working on something else similar. Not their kettle of fish. They don't like comedies. They don't like this. So you just got to keep on trying. But I think, unless you know someone in a film company that you can get it in front of. But the bottom line, as always with these things, whatever route you take, however you get your film in front of someone, it's got to be good. Because you could know head of development in X number of film companies, but if your script's poor, it doesn't matter. But good scripts, do rise to the surface, and script readers, though they're frowned upon, they roughly, usually, get it right and know what they're talking about. It's subjective, of course it is, but good scripts succeed, as I said. But having said that, if you can bypass script readers, if you can get an agent who'll give it to the head of development or whoever, then that will help your cause, I think.
Can you recommend any literary agents?
What you need to do is, there are 2 publications, Writers and Artists Yearbook, which is a big red book. Is that right? Yes, that's right. Writers and Artists Yearbook, which is a big red one, which I use. There's also the Writer's Handbook, which is a big yellow book. They're about £15 each. The yellow one used to be the one I used, but now I use the red one. And it's just full of every contact, not just film, it's literary agents, it's full of newspapers and theatres, it's just everything. The BBC, which takes about that much to get through it all. That's your compendium, and it shows all literary agents, has a list of them, the 150 or whatever there are, 90 accredited ones or so. Tells you what they want, the specialised area, tell you if they want film, tell you how to approach them, give you a name. You should go online anyway, check their websites anyway, irrespective of that, because some of them have very specific submission conditions, which generally you have to obey, really, and not annoy them. But don't be afraid. If your script's good, if you're confident, use literary agents, but write a good script first.
We should have those books here. We will invest in those books here, so they'll be here for you to look at if you want. Got time for one more quick one, Cedric?
You say about the right camera angles and that things for the director, not necessarily for feature films, I know that can be the case. If you're doing a short and you're going to be directing as well, does it make, because obviously you don't want to forget if you've got an idea.
No, it's different. No, it's different. If it's for you, you write it for you and you're going to direct it.
It was just in case you thought, well, it's better to leave it as it is and then come back to it, whether you thought it's better to then come back to it fresh, if you still think it's a good idea, or just take it.
No, I think for you, if you're going to write and direct something, then fine, you just do what you like. It's when it's for someone else to read. And as the writer, purely the writer at that stage, you don't want to trample on toes, you want to do it. There was a time when, yeah, they were full of camera angles, but shooting scripts, of course, are often different. They do often contain camera angles, but for you as the writer at this stage, no. Having said that, one or two are fine. In fact, the script I'm writing at the moment, I have got a few in there because usually you can avoid them with wording, but I've got one scene where there's a guy who's gone on a date with a woman, and she's just driven off after a successful date, and he's standing there thinking how great everything is, and his son comes out and he says, "Oh, well, it's a successful evening," and then his son says, "But did you know your flies are undone and you've got your fluffy beard is molted all over your face?" And then he just howls into the night from the street. And of course for that I've said, long shot showing the street, and because I wanted it from a distance, I wanted him just howling in the middle of the street. I couldn't think how else to say other than long shot, really.